The moment Brandon Hartwell, the founder's 28-year-old nephew, stood in front of our entire sales team and announced he was canceling our quarterly bonuses despite us crushing our goal by 200%. "Try harder next quarter," he said with that smug smile, adjusting his expensive watch. The room went dead silent. 12 months of 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners, and sacrificed weekends, all dismissed with a wave of his manicured hand. But I just smiled back and calmly said, "Conference room. 5 minutes." Because I knew something he didn't. My name is Marlene, and I'm 32 years old. I've been working at Tech Forward Solutions for 6 years, starting as a receptionist and clawing my way up to senior account executive. I'm a single mother of twin daughters, Emma and Sophie, who are 8 years old and the light of my life. Every decision I make, every risk I take, every hour I work is for them. Tech Forward Solutions is a B2B software company that founder William Hartwell built from nothing 15 years ago. It's now worth $50 million and employs over 100 people in our downtown Seattle office. Our sales team consists of 8 dedicated professionals, and though I don't have the official title, I effectively lead this group. We've become a tight-knit family over the years, supporting each other through the ups and downs of sales quotas and corporate pressure. This past quarter had been our finest hour. We didn't just meet our $3 million target, we obliterated it. I personally landed 3 massive deals: Meridian Industries for $2.3 million, Pacific Holdings for $1.8 million, and Coastal Dynamics for $1.9 million. Combined with my teammates' contributions, we brought in $6 million in new business. That's 200% of our goal, the kind of performance that should have had champagne flowing and bonuses raining down. Our team had every reason to expect substantial quarterly bonuses. Based on our performance metrics and company policy, we were looking at $8,000 to $12,000 each. For me, that money wasn't just a reward. It was essential. I'd been planning to use my bonus for my daughter's private school tuition and to finally pay off the mountain of medical bills from my mother's cancer treatment last year. Then Brandon Hartwell entered our lives 6 months ago. Brandon is William's nephew, armed with an MBA from some expensive East Coast school and absolutely no real-world experience. He was handed the position of VP of Sales Operations on a silver platter, living comfortably off his trust fund while the rest of us worked ourselves to the bone. At 28, he'd never held a real job, never missed a meal, never worried about making rent or affording health care. That Friday afternoon, at exactly 4:47 p.m., Brandon called our team into the main conference room. The timing was deliberate, late enough to ruin everyone's weekend plans, early enough to let the anxiety simmer over 2 full days. He stood at the head of the polished oak table in his $1,000 suit, his perfectly styled hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "I've been reviewing our compensation structure," he began, his voice carrying that particular brand of condescension that only comes from inherited privilege. "And I've decided we need to realign our bonus system with more sustainable growth models." My colleague Janet, a mother of 3 who'd been with the company for 4 years, leaned forward hopefully. "Does that mean our bonuses will be higher because we exceeded the target by so much?" Brandon's smile was sharp as a knife. "Actually, no. Despite your performance this quarter, I'm canceling all quarterly bonuses effective immediately. The company needs to invest in infrastructure and future growth opportunities. You should try harder next quarter." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Mike, our top performer after me, slammed his laptop shut so hard I thought it might break. Janet's eyes filled with tears as she stared down at her hands. David muttered something under his breath about looking for another job. The devastation was palpable, not just because of the lost money, but because of what this represented. A complete dismissal of our worth, our effort, our dedication. But something strange happened inside me at that moment. Instead of anger or despair, I felt a cold, calculating calm wash over me. Because while Brandon was busy playing corporate overlord, I remembered something he clearly didn't know about. something I'd negotiated 6 years ago when I was just a receptionist with big dreams and bigger determination. I stood up slowly, my chair rolling back with a soft squeak. Every eye in the room turned to me as I gathered my laptop and a manila folder I always kept in my desk drawer. My teammates looked confused by my composure, probably expecting me to either explode in anger or break down in tears like the rest of them. Instead, I looked directly at Brandon and said in the most pleasant voice I could muster, "Conference room, 5 minutes." The shift in the room was immediate. Brandon's smug expression faltered slightly. My teammates stopped their whispered complaints and stared at me with a mixture of confusion and hope. Because they knew me well enough to recognize that tone, it was the same one I used right before closing a $1 million deal. I walked out of that conference room with my head high, knowing that the next few minutes were going to change everything. The executive conference room sat on the top floor of our building, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of downtown Seattle's skyline. The Space Needle gleamed in the distance, and Elliott Bay sparkled under the late afternoon sunday. It was a room designed to intimidate, with its polished mahogany table that could seat 20, and walls lined with awards and photos of William Hartwell's various business achievements. Brandon arrived exactly 5 minutes later, his confidence clearly shaken but his arrogance intact. "Marlene, I don't know what you think this meeting is going to accomplish, but company policy is company policy. My decision is final." I was already seated at the head of the table, my laptop open and connected to the massive wall-mounted screen. The manila folder sat beside me, thick with documents I'd been hoping I'd never need to use. "Have a seat, Brandon. We're waiting for one more person." His eyebrows shot up. "Who exactly are we waiting for?" Right on cue, the conference phone rang. I answered it with a smile. "Uncle William? Thank you so much for joining us." William Hartwell's face appeared on the screen via video call, and I could see he was at his vacation home in Martha's Vineyard. He was dressed in golf attire, a polo shirt and khakis, and looked mildly irritated at being interrupted from what was probably a weekend on the greens. "Marlene, what's this about?" Brandon said there was some kind of emergency meeting, but he was very vague on the details. Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Uncle William, this really isn't necessary. It's just an employee complaint about the bonus restructuring. I can handle this internally." "Actually," I interjected smoothly, "I think William needs to see this." I clicked a button on my laptop, and my original hiring agreement from 6 years ago appeared on the screen. "William, you might remember this document. You and I spent considerable time negotiating the terms when I was promoted from receptionist to sales associate." William leaned closer to his camera, squinting at the screen. "That looks like our standard employment contract. What am I supposed to be looking at?" I scrolled down to a specific section and highlighted it in bright yellow. Section 7.4, subsection B, the Performance Incentive Guarantee Clause. Brandon's face went pale. "What clause? I've never seen anything like that in our current contracts." "That's because this was a special negotiation," I explained, my voice steady and professional. "Let me read it aloud for everyone's benefit. If employee personally generates revenue exceeding 150% of individual quota and team exceeds collective target by 100%, employee receives guaranteed minimum bonus of $15,000 plus 2% of total team overperformance." The silence in the room was deafening. Brandon's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. William's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something that might have been respect. "Brandon," William said slowly, "are you familiar with this clause?" No, I've never seen it before. This must be some kind of legacy paperwork that doesn't apply anymore." I clicked to the signature page, where William's distinctive scrawl was clearly visible next to my own signature and the date from 6 years ago. It's a legally binding contract, signed by both parties and witnessed by HR. Let me break down the math for everyone. Another click brought up a spreadsheet I'd prepared. My individual quota this quarter was $1.2 million. I personally generated $2.4 million, exactly 200% of my target. Our team goal was $3 million, and we achieved $6 million to 200% of the team target, which exceeds the required 100% threshold. Brandon found his voice. Marlene, even if this clause exists, the company simply can't afford to pay out that kind of money right now. We have expenses, overhead, future investments to consider. Let me finish the calculation. I continued calmly. $15,000 guaranteed minimum, plus 2% of the $3 million overperformance. That's $15,000 plus $60,000, for a total of $75,000. William whistled low. $75,000, which, coincidentally, I added with a slight smile, is exactly what my brother-in-law, the employment attorney, said I could expect when I showed him this contract yesterday. Brandon shot to his feet. This is ridiculous. You can't just waltz in here and demand $75,000 based on some outdated paperwork. Where's your loyalty to this company? Your team spirit? I remained perfectly calm. Brandon, this isn't about loyalty or team spirit. This is about honoring legally binding agreements and treating employees with the respect they've earned through performance. You want to talk about company expenses? Let's talk about them. William's voice cut through Brandon's sputtering. Brandon, I need you to step out of this call. I want to speak with Marlene privately. What? Uncle William, you can't be seriously considering this. She's trying to extort the company. Brandon. William's tone carried the steel that had built Tech Forward from a garage startup to a $50 million company. Leave. Now. Brandon looked back and forth between the screen and me, his face flushing red with anger and embarrassment. He gathered his papers with jerky, agitated movements and stormed toward the door. Just before he reached it, he turned back. This isn't over, Marlene. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you're messing with. The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. I waited until his footsteps faded down the hallway before turning back to the screen, where William was studying me with newfound interest. Well, he said finally, this is certainly not how I expected to spend my Saturday evening. William leaned back in his chair, and I could see him more clearly now. A man in his early 50s with graying hair and sharp blue eyes that had seen decades of business negotiations. Despite being interrupted during his vacation, he didn't seem angry. Instead, he looked almost amused. Marlene, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I do remember negotiating that clause. You were 26 years old, working as a receptionist, but you had this fire in your eyes. You'd been taking night classes in business and sales, and you convinced me to give you a shot at the sales floor. You took a chance on me when no one else would, I replied. I've never forgotten that. And clearly, you never forgot the terms we agreed to either. He chuckled and shook his head. I have to admit, I'm impressed. Most people would have just accepted Brandon's decision and complained about it over drinks. You documented everything and came prepared with legal backup. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd been planning for, the point where I either gained William's respect or lost my job entirely. William, I need to tell you something. This isn't just about my bonus. His expression grew more serious. What do you mean? I opened my manila folder and pulled out a stack of documents. Over the past 6 months, I've been documenting some concerning decisions that Brandon has made. I initially kept these records to protect myself and my team, but I think you need to see them. What kind of decisions? I spread the papers on the table where the camera could capture them. 3 weeks after Brandon started, he canceled our annual team building retreat. The budget was $15,000. Money that had already been approved and was important for team morale after a difficult quarter. I wasn't aware of that decision. 2 months ago, he refused to approve an upgrade to our sales software that would have increased our efficiency by an estimated 30%. The cost was $8,000, less than what he spent on redecorating his office. William's frown deepened. Continue. Last month, he hired his girlfriend's friend as our new marketing coordinator. Sarah has a degree in art history and no marketing experience, but she's making $65,000 a year. Meanwhile, Janet, in our sales team, who has 4 years of experience and consistently hits her targets, was denied a $5,000 raise. I pulled out a folder of expense reports. And then there are these. Brandon has been submitting expense reports for personal trips to the company account. A weekend in Vegas, dinners with college friends, even dry cleaning for clothes he wears outside of work. William was no longer looking amused. Let me see those. I held up the documents so he could see them clearly on camera. His face grew darker with each page. How much are we talking about? Approximately $12,000 over 4 months. All approved by himself, since he has signing authority on expense accounts up to $15,000. The silence stretched between us. William ran his hand through his graying hair and let out a long sigh. Marlene, why are you showing me this? What do you want? I want what's best for this company, I said honestly. Tech Forward gave me an opportunity when I was just a single mother trying to build a better life for my daughters. This place isn't just my employer, it's my professional home. But Brandon is destroying everything you've built. He's family, Marlene, my sister's son. When Patricia asked me to give him a chance, I couldn't say no. I leaned forward. I understand family loyalty, William. But answer me this. When you started this company 15 years ago, did you build it to be a family employment program, or did you build it to be a successful business that takes care of the people who earn their place here? William was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that sounded like regret. You remind me of myself when I was starting out. Hungry, determined, willing to fight for what you believe in. Then you understand why I can't just accept what happened today. It's not about the money, William. It's about the principle. If Brandon can cancel our bonuses after the best quarter in company history, what's next? Our healthcare? Our vacation time? Where does it end? The situation is more complicated than you realize, William said slowly. Patricia isn't just Brandon's mother. She's also one of our major investors and sits on our board of directors. Making changes that affect Brandon could have serious implications for our funding and governance structure. My heart sank a little, but I pressed on. What if I told you that keeping Brandon in his current position could have even more serious implications? What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a folder I'd been hoping I wouldn't need to open. 3 weeks ago, I was working late and needed to print something from the shared network drive. I accidentally accessed Brandon's email folder instead of the shared documents folder. William leaned forward. And I found email exchanges between Brandon and Marcus Chen, the VP of sales at our biggest competitor, Synergy Solutions. They've been in communication about potential job opportunities. That's not necessarily concerning. People network all the time. William, in one of those emails, Brandon discussed potentially sharing client information in exchange for a guaranteed position at their company. The color drained from William's face. That would be corporate espionage. At minimum, it's a breach of his fiduciary duty to Tech Forward and a violation of every non-disclosure agreement he signed when he started here. William was quiet for several minutes, his face cycling through emotions I couldn't quite read. Finally, he spoke. Marlene, what you're describing could void Brandon's employment contract entirely and expose him to personal liability for damages. Are you certain about these emails? I took screenshots. I can send them to you right now if you'd like. This changes everything. William rubbed his temples. If what you're telling me is true, then Brandon has put our entire company at risk. Our client relationships, our proprietary information, our competitive advantage, everything. I'm not telling you this to destroy your family, William. I'm telling you because I believe Tech Forward can be saved. But it requires making some difficult decisions. William looked directly into the camera, and for a moment, I felt like he was seeing me. Really seeing me. For the first time. What are you proposing? Give me a chance to fix this. Promote me to sales director with real authority to make decisions that benefit the team and the company. Implement a transparent bonus structure that rewards performance instead of punishing it. And yes, honor the contract we both signed 6 years ago. And Brandon, that's your decision. But if I were you, I'd be more concerned about protecting the company from potential litigation than protecting someone who's actively working to undermine it. William was quiet again, and I could see him weighing options in his mind. Finally, he spoke. I'm going to ask you to do something that might be difficult. I want you to present all of this information to Brandon and Patricia together. If we're going to make changes, everyone needs to understand why. My stomach tightened. Are you sure that's wise? Marlene, you've just handed me evidence that my nephew may have committed corporate espionage. If I act on this information without giving him and my sister a chance to respond, I'm going to tear my family apart. But if I don't act on it, I might lose my company. I understood. This wasn't just a business decision for William. It was personal. When do you want to do this? Right now. I'm going to call Patricia and ask her to join this video call. Are you prepared to present everything you've shown me? I looked down at my documents, then back at the screen. William, once I present this evidence in front of Patricia and Brandon, there's no going back. This will change everything. I know, he said quietly. But you're right about one thing. If we don't address this now, there might not be a company left to save. 20 minutes later, the conference room felt like a courtroom. Brandon had returned, his earlier confidence replaced by barely contained anxiety. He kept glancing at my folder of documents and checking his phone nervously. Through the video call, I could see that Patricia Hartwell had joined William. She looked exactly like what I'd expected from Brandon's entitled behavior, perfectly coiffed, wearing what appeared to be an expensive silk blouse and radiating the kind of cold authority that comes from inherited wealth. William, I don't appreciate being dragged away from my charity luncheon for employee relations issues, Patricia said crisply. Surely Brandon can handle whatever minor complaint this is. Mom, it's not minor, Brandon interjected. Marlene is trying to shake down the company for $75,000 based on some ancient contract clause. She's being completely unreasonable. I remained calm, my hands folded on the table. Patricia, it's nice to finally meet you, even under these circumstances. I've heard wonderful things about your philanthropy work. She looked momentarily taken aback by my politeness. Yes. Well, thank you. Now, what exactly is this about? William cleared his throat. Patricia, Marlene has brought some concerns to my attention that go beyond the bonus issue. I think you need to hear what she has to say. For the next 15 minutes, I methodically presented my evidence. I started with the canceled team retreat, moved through the denied software upgrades and questionable hiring practices, then detailed the personal expense reports. Patricia's expression grew increasingly stern as I spoke, but Brandon kept interrupting with explanations and justifications. The retreat was an unnecessary expense, he insisted. The software upgrade could wait until next fiscal year. Sarah brings fresh perspectives to our marketing team. Fresh perspectives? I replied calmly. Sarah has sent 3 client communications with spelling errors and designed a marketing brochure that featured our competitor's logo instead of ours. Patricia's lips tightened. Brandon, is this true? It was a simple mistake. Everyone makes errors when they're learning. I continued with the expense reports, laying out each personal charge in detail. When I finished, Patricia was silent for a long moment. "Brandon," she said finally, "these expense reports show a serious lack of judgment." "Mom, those were legitimate business expenses. Networking events, client entertainment. A weekend in Las Vegas with your college fraternity brothers is not client entertainment." But I wasn't finished. The room fell silent as I opened my phone and pulled up the screenshots I'd taken of Brandon's email exchanges with Synergy Solutions. "There's one more issue we need to discuss," I said quietly. "Brandon, 3 weeks ago, were you in communication with Marcus Chen at Synergy Solutions about potential employment opportunities?" Brandon's face went white. What are you talking about?" I read directly from the screenshot. "This is from an email you sent on October 15th. Marcus, I appreciate the offer to discuss opportunities at Synergy. As we talked about, I have access to Tech Forward's complete client database and competitive pricing strategies. If the right position opened up, I'd be happy to bring my institutional knowledge with me." The silence in the room was deafening. Patricia stared at her son with a mixture of horror and disbelief. William's jaw was clenched so tightly, I thought his teeth might crack. "Brandon," Patricia's voice was ice cold, "tell me you did not just hear what I think I heard." "Mom, it wasn't. I was just exploring options. I never actually shared any information." I pulled up another screenshot. In your follow-up email from October 22nd, you wrote, "I've attached our Q3 client performance metrics as a show of good faith. This should give you an idea of the kind of value I could bring to your organization." Brandon shot to his feet. "You're taking those emails out of context. I was just networking." "Networking?" William's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Brandon, you just admitted to sharing confidential client information with our biggest competitor." "I didn't think. They were just basic metrics." Patricia's composure finally cracked. "You didn't think? Brandon, do you have any idea what you've done? Those client metrics are proprietary information. You've exposed our entire family to potential lawsuits." Outside the conference room, I could see several of my sales teammates gathered in the hallway. Word had clearly spread about the meeting, and they were waiting anxiously for news about their bonuses. Janet caught my eye through the glass wall and gave me a tentative thumbs up. "There's something else," I said quietly. Everyone turned to me. "Yesterday, I received calls from 3 of our top-performing sales team members. They've all been approached by competitors with job offers. If this bonus situation isn't resolved, and if the leadership issues continue, you're looking at a mass exodus from the sales department." William leaned forward on the video call. "How many people are we talking about?" "Potentially the entire 8-person sales team. That represents not just our revenue-generating capacity, but also our institutional knowledge about client relationships and market strategies." Patricia looked stricken. The timing couldn't be worse. "William, didn't you mention that acquisition talks were heating up?" William nodded grimly. "Meridian Corp has been evaluating us for potential purchase. If we lose our sales team right now, it could tank the entire deal." I saw my opening. There's a solution here that protects everyone's interests. "Brandon, you made some serious mistakes, but they can be corrected. The client information you shared was concerning, but Marcus Chen hasn't acted on it yet, which means we can control the damage." "What are you proposing?" Patricia asked. "First, all quarterly bonuses are paid immediately, as originally promised. The team needs to know their work is valued. Second, Brandon steps back from operational decision-making until he completes comprehensive training on corporate governance, fiduciary responsibility, and business ethics." Brandon's mouth fell open. "You want me to step down?" "I want you to step up," I replied firmly. "Take responsibility for your mistakes, learn from them, and earn your place in this company through merit instead of family connections." "And your role in all this?" William asked. promote me to sales director with full authority to manage the team, implement transparent performance metrics, and rebuild the culture of excellence that Tech Forward is known for. I'll also work with HR to ensure all employees understand their rights and responsibilities. Patricia was studying me intently. What about the corporate espionage issue? If Brandon agrees to ethical training and commits to proper business practices going forward, I see no reason to pursue external legal action. The important thing is ensuring it never happens again. Brandon looked back and forth between his mother and uncle, desperation creeping into his voice. Mom, Uncle William, you can't be seriously considering this. She's just an employee. She's trying to stage a coup. Patricia's voice was quiet but deadly serious. Brandon, sit down and be quiet. You've done enough damage for one day. William spoke next. Marlene, if I agree to these terms, can you guarantee the sales team will stay? I can guarantee they'll have reason to stay. Fair compensation, transparent management, and opportunities for growth based on performance. That's all anyone really wants. And the acquisition talks? A stable, high-performing sales team with proven leadership will only increase Tech Forward's value to potential buyers. Patricia suddenly spoke up. I support Marlene's proposal. Everyone turned to stare at her. Brandon's face crumpled. Mom? Brandon, I've been receiving complaints about your performance from other departments for months. I was planning to address this at the next board meeting anyway. Marlene has simply forced the issue into the open, and frankly, I'm grateful. Better to deal with this now than during acquisition negotiations. William nodded slowly. Marlene, you'll have your promotion to sales director, effective Monday morning. The sales team will receive their full quarterly bonuses plus an additional 15% for the stress and uncertainty they've endured. And my contractual bonus? Every penny, as agreed. $75,000, paid with the next payroll cycle. I felt a wave of relief so powerful I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. Thank you, William. You won't regret this decision. Brandon slumped in his chair, defeated. So that's it? 6 months of my life, and I'm just out? William's voice was firm but not unkind. You're not out, Brandon. You're being given a chance to learn and grow. Complete the ethics training. Prove you can contribute positively to this company. And we'll discuss your future role, Patricia added. And Brandon, you'll be returning every penny of those inappropriate expense charges. Consider yourself fortunate that we're handling this internally. As the video call ended and Patricia signed off with promises to discuss governance improvements, I gathered my documents with hands that were only slightly shaking. The sales team was still waiting outside, their faces pressed against the glass like children waiting for Christmas morning. Brandon stood up slowly, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume he no longer deserved to wear. Marlene, I underestimated you. Yes, I replied simply. You did. The moment I opened the conference room door, the entire sales team surged forward. 8 faces filled with anxiety, hope, and barely contained desperation looked at me expectantly. Janet grabbed my arm with trembling fingers. Marlene, please tell us you have good news. I can't. My kids need their Christmas presents. I can't afford to start over somewhere else. I looked at each of their faces, colleagues who had become family over the years of shared struggles and victories, Mike with his new mortgage, David who was saving for his wedding, Sarah who was putting herself through graduate school, Tom whose wife was pregnant with their first child. These weren't just employees whose bonuses had been canceled. These were people whose lives hung in the balance. Everyone, please come back into the conference room. I have news. They filed in quietly, taking seats around the polished table where just minutes before I had fought the most important battle of my career. Brandon had already left, probably to clear out his office and nurse his wounded pride. I stood at the head of the table, looking at the 8 people who had trusted me to speak for them. First, the most important news. All quarterly bonuses are being paid immediately, plus an additional 15% bonus for the stress and uncertainty you've endured. The eruption was immediate. Janet burst into tears of relief. Mike actually whooped and punched the air. David pulled out his phone to call his fiancée. The tension that had gripped our team for the past several hours finally broke, replaced by joy and disbelief. "Wait, there's more," I said, raising my voice over their celebration. "Effective Monday morning, I'm being promoted to sales director with full authority to manage our team. We're also implementing a transparent bonus structure so this situation never happens again." "What about Brandon?" asked Tom, always the practical one. "Brandon is stepping back from operational decision-making to complete ethics and business training. He'll remain with the company, but won't have authority over our team or our compensation." Mike leaned back in his chair, grinning. "Marlene, I don't know how you pulled this off, but you just saved all our careers." "I didn't do this alone," I replied. "This was about all of us standing together and demanding fair treatment. But there's something else I need to tell you." I pulled out the contract that had started this entire confrontation. 6 years ago, when I was promoted from receptionist to sales associate, I negotiated a special performance clause in my hiring agreement. Today, that clause earned me a $75,000 bonus. The room went silent. I could see them processing the number, trying to understand what that meant. Janet spoke first. "Marlene, that's incredible. You deserve every penny. But here's the thing," I continued. "That money represents more than just my performance. It represents what happens when we document our worth, understand our rights, and refuse to accept less than we deserve." Over the next hour, we talked about everything that had led to this moment. I explained the hidden clause, the documentation process, and the strategic approach I'd taken. But more importantly, we talked about what this meant for our team's future. "I want each of you to understand something," I said, as our impromptu celebration wound down. "What happened today wasn't magic. It was preparation meeting opportunity. From now on, we're all going to document our contributions, understand our contracts, and support each other in demanding fair treatment." 3 days later, the official announcements went out. My promotion to sales director was accompanied by a company-wide email from William explaining the implementation of new transparent performance metrics and compensation structures. The message was clear. Tech Forward was recommitting to merit-based leadership and employee rights. Brandon's departure was handled more quietly. He cleaned out his office over the weekend, and a brief company announcement mentioned that he was pursuing external professional development opportunities. I heard through the office grapevine that he'd enrolled in a business ethics program at a local university. Perhaps the experience would teach him something about earning success rather than inheriting it. The $75,000 bonus hit my bank account the following Friday. I stared at the number on my phone screen for a full 5 minutes, hardly believing it was real. That afternoon, I drove to my daughter's school and submitted their private school applications for the next academic year. The tuition was fully covered. That evening, I called the billing department at the hospital where my mother had received her cancer treatment. "I'd like to pay off the remaining balance on my mother's account," I said. "All of it." The representative was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Johnson, that's quite a substantial amount. Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Can you process a payment today?" "Absolutely." "And Mrs. Johnson? I'm very happy for you and your family, but the real victory came 6 weeks later when our first quarter numbers under my leadership came in. The sales team, energized by fair treatment and clear expectations, had exceeded our target by 150%. More importantly, not a single team member had left for a competitor position. In fact, we'd had 3 employees from other companies specifically request transfers to our department. The acquisition talks that William had mentioned were progressing better than anyone had expected. Meridian Corp's evaluation team was impressed not just with our financial performance, but with our employee satisfaction metrics and retention rates. During one of their visits, the lead evaluator specifically mentioned that our sales department's stability and leadership were key factors in their positive assessment. 2 months after my confrontation with Brandon, William called me into his office for a private meeting. The same executive conference room where I'd fought for my team's rights now felt like a second home. "Marlene, I have some news," William said, settling into his chair with a smile I'd rarely seen before. "Meridian Corp has increased their offer by $8 million. Their evaluation team cited our improved leadership structure and employee satisfaction as major factors in the increased valuation." I felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with validation. That's wonderful news for everyone. There's more. As part of the acquisition, they're specifically requesting that you remain as sales director and are offering you an equity package in the merged company. William, I don't know what to say. Say yes. You've earned this, Marlene. You fought for what was right when it would have been easier to stay quiet. You protected not just your own interests, but the interests of every employee in this company. I thought about that moment 6 years ago when I was just a receptionist with big dreams and bigger determination. I thought about the hidden clause I'd insisted on negotiating, never knowing it would one day save not just my career but my entire team. I thought about my daughters and the opportunities that were now available to them. Yes, I said finally. Absolutely yes. The acquisition was finalized 3 months later, and Tech Forward Solutions became a subsidiary of Meridian Corp with full operational independence. My equity package, combined with my original $75,000 bonus and the increased value of the acquisition, provided my family with long-term financial security I'd never dreamed possible. But more importantly, the principles we'd established, transparent compensation, merit-based leadership, and employee rights, became the foundation for how the merged company operated across all its divisions. 6 months after that pivotal Friday afternoon, I stood in the same conference room where I'd fought for my team's future, but everything had changed. The room now hosted our weekly sales meetings, and instead of fear and uncertainty, it was filled with energy and collaboration. Our team had grown from 8 to 12 members, and every new hire had been recruited through merit-based selection and competitive compensation packages. The immediate aftermath of Brandon's departure had been surprisingly smooth. The day after our confrontation, I called an all-hands meeting for the entire sales department. I explained everything that had happened, emphasizing that we'd moved from a culture of arbitrary decision-making to one of transparency and fairness. From now on, I told them, every bonus calculation will be published. Every promotion will be based on documented performance metrics. Every policy change will be discussed with the team before implementation. The response was overwhelming. Janet, who had been planning to leave for a competitor, canceled her job interviews. Mike, who had been updating his resume every night, deleted his LinkedIn job alerts. David proposed to his fiancée 2 weeks early because he finally felt secure in his career prospects. But the transformation went far beyond our sales team. Word of what happened spread through the entire company, and other departments began asking questions about their own compensation structures and advancement opportunities. HR found themselves fielding more employee inquiries in 1 month than they typically received in a year, but these weren't complaints. They were requests for clarification about rights, policies, and career development paths. William embraced the cultural shift wholeheartedly. He instituted monthly all-hands meetings where employees could ask questions directly to leadership. He implemented an anonymous feedback system that actually resulted in meaningful policy changes. Most importantly, he established a merit-based promotion committee that included employee representatives from each department. The company's transformation attracted attention from industry publications. Within 4 months, Tech Forward was featured in 3 different business magazines as an example of successful employee-centric leadership. The Seattle Business Journal ran a cover story titled, When Employees Fight Back: How One Sales Team Transformed a Company Culture. But the real validation came from our performance numbers. In the 6 months following my promotion, our sales department exceeded every quarterly target. More significantly, our employee satisfaction scores reached the 95th percentile in our industry, and our retention rate was the highest in the company's 15-year history. The acquisition process that William had mentioned proved even more successful than anticipated. Meridian Corp's due diligence team spent weeks examining our operations, and they were consistently impressed by our employee engagement metrics and leadership stability. During their final presentation, the lead evaluator specifically mentioned that our sales department's culture and performance were key factors in justifying the premium price they were offering. In most acquisitions, she explained during the closing meeting, we factor in a 30 to 40% employee turnover rate as businesses integrate. With TechForward's current culture and leadership structure, we're projecting less than 5% turnover, which dramatically increases the value of your human capital assets. The final acquisition price was $58 million, $8 million more than the original offer. William's decision to support transparency and employee rights had literally translated into increased company value. My personal equity package in the merged company was valued at $150,000, vesting over 3 years. Combined with my salary increase to sales director and the original $75,000 bonus, my family's financial picture had transformed completely. But money was only part of the story. The real change was in how I saw myself and my place in the business world. 6 months earlier, I had been a talented employee who kept her head down and hoped for fair treatment. Now, I was a leader who understood that fighting for justice doesn't just benefit yourself, it creates positive change for everyone. 3 of my original sales team members received promotions within the merged company structure. Janet was promoted to regional sales manager for the Pacific Northwest. Mike became a senior account executive with his own team. David transitioned into business development, where his analytical skills were perfectly suited to identifying new market opportunities. Even Brandon's story had an unexpected positive turn. After completing his ethics training and spending 6 months in a junior analyst role at a smaller company, he reached out to me with a request that surprised us both. "Marlene," he said during a coffee meeting in downtown Seattle, "I want to apologize, not just for the bonus situation, but for my entire attitude when I started at TechForward. I thought I deserved success because of my family connections, and I didn't understand what it meant to earn respect through performance." He looked genuinely humbled, wearing a modest business suit instead of his previous designer wardrobe. "I've learned more about business and leadership in the past 6 months than I did in my entire MBA program. Would you be willing to serve as a reference if I apply for sales positions? I want to build my career the right way this time." I agreed, and 6 weeks later, Brandon was hired as a junior sales associate at a mid-sized technology company. His new manager specifically mentioned that my reference, emphasizing his willingness to learn from mistakes and commitment to ethical business practices, had been a deciding factor in the hiring decision. The ripple effects of our confrontation continued spreading throughout the industry. At professional networking events, I found myself regularly approached by other sales professionals asking for advice about understanding their contracts and documenting their contributions. I started receiving invitations to speak at women's business groups and professional development workshops. One presentation to a group of working mothers in technology was particularly meaningful. I shared the complete story of the hidden clause and the strategic approach I'd taken, emphasizing the importance of negotiating for your worth and maintaining detailed performance records. "Your value doesn't just come from the work you do," I told the audience. "It comes from your ability to document that work, understand your rights, and have the courage to demand fair treatment when those rights are threatened." After that presentation, I received dozens of emails from women who had reviewed their own contracts and discovered forgotten clauses or negotiated terms that could benefit their careers. Several found discrepancies in their compensation that were corrected after bringing them to their employer's attention. My daughters, Emma and Sophie, were perhaps the most important witnesses to this transformation. They saw their mother stand up for herself and her colleagues, fight for justice, and create positive change through strategic thinking and careful preparation. More importantly, they saw that sometimes the right thing to do is also the most difficult thing to do, but that courage and preparation can overcome seemingly impossible odds. "Mommy," Sophie said one evening while I was helping with her homework, "when I grow up and have a job, I want to be brave like you were." "What does that mean to you, sweetheart?" "It means knowing what I'm worth and not letting anyone tell me I'm worth less than that." At 8 years old, she had understood the most important lesson of the entire experience. 1 year later, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in my new home, adjusting the collar of my business suit before heading to what had become one of my favorite professional responsibilities, speaking at the University of Washington's Business School about workplace advocacy and strategic career development. The house itself was a testament to how dramatically my life had changed. Located in a quiet neighborhood in Bellevue, it had 4 bedrooms, a home office where I could work remotely, and a backyard where Emma and Sophie could play safely. The mortgage was manageable thanks to my increased salary and equity package, but more importantly, it represented stability and security I'd never experienced before. My daughters were thriving in their private school, excelling academically and participating in programs that had previously been financially out of reach. Emma had joined the robotics club and was already talking about becoming an engineer. Sophie had discovered a love for debate team and was developing the kind of confident speaking skills that would serve her well in any career she chose. But as I drove toward the university campus that morning, I wasn't thinking about houses or schools or investment accounts. I was thinking about the letter I'd received the previous week from a woman named Patricia Thompson. Not the Patricia Hartwell who was Brandon's mother, but a sales manager from Portland who had attended one of my presentations 6 months earlier. "Dear Marlene," her letter began, "I wanted to update you on what happened after your presentation about documentation and contract negotiation. I went home and reviewed my employment agreement from 4 years ago. I found a clause about performance bonuses that my company had been ignoring for 2 years. When I presented it to my manager with documented proof of my performance metrics, not only did I receive the back bonuses I was owed, but my company reviewed their compensation practices company-wide. 17 other employees received adjustments to their pay, and our entire office culture has improved. Thank you for teaching me that knowing my worth means being willing to fight for it." That letter was one of dozens I'd received from women across the country who had attended my presentations or heard about my story through professional networks. Each letter represented someone who had found the courage to advocate for themselves and had created positive change in their workplace as a result. The acquisition of Tech Forward by Meridian Corp had been completed 8 months earlier, and the integration had exceeded everyone's expectations. My role had expanded to Regional Sales Director for the Pacific Northwest, overseeing 4 teams across 3 cities. More importantly, the principles we'd established at Tech Forward, transparency, merit-based advancement, and employee advocacy, had been adopted as company-wide policies across all Meridian subsidiaries. William had used his portion of the acquisition proceeds to start the Hartwell Foundation, focused specifically on supporting working mothers in technology fields. The foundation offered everything from emergency childcare funding to professional development scholarships to legal assistance for workplace discrimination cases. "You inspired this," he had told me during the foundation's launch event. "What you did that day wasn't just about bonuses or promotions. You showed that one person with courage and preparation can transform an entire organization." Even Brandon had found his footing in the business world. After 18 months as a junior sales associate, he had been promoted to account manager at his new company. He had earned the promotion through performance metrics and client satisfaction scores, not family connections. When he called to share the news, I could hear genuine pride in his voice, not the entitled confidence of his earlier days, but the satisfaction that comes from earning success through hard work. "I owe you an apology and a thank you," he had said during that call. "You could have destroyed my career completely, but instead you gave me a chance to learn and grow. I finally understand what it means to earn my place in business." The speaking engagement at the University of Washington that morning was particularly special because it was part of a new course on workplace advocacy and employee rights that the business school had added to their curriculum. The class was taught by Dr. Sarah Chen, an employment law professor who had become a close friend and collaborator. "Students," I said to the class of 45 graduate students, "I want you to understand something fundamental about your future careers. Your value is not just determined by the quality of your work, it's determined by your ability to recognize that value, document it, and advocate for it when necessary." I spent an hour walking them through the entire story: the hidden clause, the documentation process, the strategic confrontation, and the positive outcomes that resulted. But more importantly, I emphasized the principles that could apply to any career situation. First, always read and understand every document you sign, especially employment agreements. Most people sign contracts without fully comprehending the terms, and they miss opportunities to negotiate for better conditions. Second, document everything. Every achievement, every contribution, every instance of going above and beyond your basic job requirements. If you can't prove your value, it's difficult to argue for fair compensation. Third, understand that advocating for yourself is not selfish. It's essential. When you demand fair treatment based on merit and performance, you create positive change that benefits everyone in your organization. And finally, remember that courage combined with preparation is incredibly powerful. Most people accept unfair treatment because they believe they have no other options. But when you understand your rights and have documented your worth, you always have options. During the question and answer session, a young woman in the front row raised her hand. "Miss Johnson, what if you had been wrong? What if the hidden clause hadn't been valid, or if the company had decided to fire you instead of promoting you?" It was a question I received frequently, and it deserved an honest answer. That's exactly why preparation is so important. I didn't walk into that conference room on a whim or based on hope. I consulted with an employment attorney. I documented every questionable decision Brandon had made. I had evidence of potential corporate espionage. Even if the hidden clause had been invalidated, I had sufficient grounds for a wrongful termination lawsuit if they had fired me. But beyond the legal protections, I continued, I had reached a point where staying silent was no longer an option. When you're a single mother watching your colleagues get crushed by unfair treatment, when you're seeing talented people consider leaving because they're not valued, when you know that your silence enables injustice to continue, that's when you realize that the risk of speaking up is smaller than the risk of staying quiet. After the presentation, Dr. Chen and I had lunch at a small cafe near campus. "Marlene," she said over coffee, "I have a proposition for you. The business school is considering creating a certificate program in workplace advocacy and employee rights. Would you be interested in co-developing the curriculum and serving as a practitioner instructor?" The opportunity was intriguing. Teaching future business leaders about ethical practices and employee advocacy could create positive change on a scale much larger than individual presentations or consultations. What would that involve? Developing a comprehensive program that covers contract negotiation, documentation strategies, legal rights awareness, and strategic communication. We'd also include case studies and role-playing scenarios so students can practice these skills in safe environments. I thought about all the women who had reached out to me over the past year. All the stories of workplace injustice that could have been prevented with better education and preparation. I'm very interested. When would this program launch? Fall semester next year. It would be a continuing education offering initially, but if it's successful, we'd integrate it into our regular MBA curriculum. That afternoon, driving home through the Seattle traffic, I reflected on how much had changed since that Friday afternoon when Brandon Hartwell had dismissed our team's extraordinary performance. The financial transformation was obvious. My family was secure in ways I'd never imagined possible. But the personal transformation was even more significant. I had discovered that I wasn't just a talented employee who hoped for fair treatment. I was a leader who could create fair treatment through strategic action and principled courage. More importantly, I had learned that individual acts of advocacy can create systemic change when they inspire others to recognize and demand their own worth. My phone buzzed with a text message from Janet, who was now regional sales manager for the Pacific Northwest. Marlene, remember that team retreat Brandon canceled 6 years ago? I'm organizing one for all 4 regional sales teams. Can you believe we're going to have 80 people? Thanks for making this possible. That evening, I helped Emma and Sophie with their homework at the kitchen table of our comfortable home. Emma was working on a math project about percentage increases, calculating compound growth rates with the kind of analytical thinking that reminded me of myself at her age. "Mommy," she said, looking up from her calculator, "if you started with $100 and increased it by 200%, then increased that by 150%, then increase that by 100%. How much would you have?" I helped her work through the problem step by step, watching her understand how small changes compounded into dramatic results over time. $1,500, she announced proudly. "That's right, sweetheart. And do you see how each improvement built on the previous one?" She nodded enthusiastically. "That's exactly how change works in real life, too. One person standing up for what's right creates opportunities for more people to stand up. And eventually, everything improves for everyone." Sophie looked up from her book report. "Is that what you did at your work, Mommy?" "Yes, sweetheart. I stood up for what was right, and it made things better not just for me, but for all my colleagues and even people at other companies who heard the story." "And that's why you give speeches now?" "Exactly. Because when people understand their worth and know how to fight for it, they can create positive change wherever they work." As I tucked them into bed that night, I thought about the question I always asked at the end of my presentations. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? For me, the answer was no longer hypothetical. I had learned that with proper preparation, strategic thinking, and principled courage, failure wasn't just unlikely. It became almost impossible. The hidden clause that started everything was just a piece of paper with legal language, but it represented something much more important: the value of knowing your worth and having the courage to demand it. That principle had transformed not just my career and my family's future, but the lives of dozens of other professionals who had found their own courage to advocate for fair treatment. As I write this story today, I'm serving as the Director of Workplace Advocacy for Meridian Corp, overseeing employee relations and professional development for over 1,500 employees across 12 states. The certificate program at the University of Washington has graduated over 200 professionals who are now creating positive change in their own organizations. But perhaps most importantly, I'm raising 2 daughters who understand that their worth is not determined by what others decide to give them, but by what they know they deserve and their willingness to fight for it. That's the lesson I want to leave with you. Sometimes the most powerful weapon you have is simply knowing your worth and having the courage to demand it. When you fight for justice, you don't just change your own life, you create a ripple effect that makes the world a little more fair for everyone. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you knew you were being treated unfairly but weren't sure how to fight back? What steps could you take today to better document your contributions and understand your workplace rights? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, you have more power than you think. Use it wisely.